Hi friends, welcome back. Today I'll bring you a new horror stories. But before we begin, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. As usual, the stories will be told by Mr. X. So, dim your light, pull up your blanket, and let's begin the stories.
This was when I was a freshman in high school. The town I lived in was small, and I guess you could say pretty old-fashioned compared to places nowadays. It was very woodsy all around, and the buildings and houses weren't so compacted together. My home was out in the woods. My parents had a decent amount of land, and my dad had built the place with his dad. Anyway, it didn't have a real road or a driveway. It was more of a dirt trail, so the school buses didn't have a stop at our place. I'd either have to walk a mile to my friend's house to get picked up, or just walk the extra distance straight to school. Usually, I'd just walk all the way to school. This was a typical day, as far as I could tell. I was walking down the trail from my home, enjoying the calm morning sounds of the woods, when I spotted a car up ahead. It wasn't my parents' car or anyone else's that I knew, and it was just parked right on the trail. This trail only led to and from the house, so someone being on here was unusual. I don't know if I'd ever seen a random car here at all before this. I felt kind of uncomfortable having to pass it. There was a woman inside. She looked 35 or 40 with dark circles under her eyes and shaggy black hair. She glanced at me, but I just looked down. I could feel her eyes on me as I walked past, though. I picked up the pace and got to school. At the dinner table that night, I mentioned it to my parents, asking who it was and why they were there. Both of them looked worried and confused. They told me the woman must have just gotten lost and I shouldn't worry about it. But I could see the worry in their eyes. They dropped me off at school for the next week, which was odd because they both started work early, like 6 a.m., so they must have called in late for the entire week just to drop me off. Honestly, I thought that it was an overreaction, as I felt I was old enough to handle myself, but I knew my parents were just being safe. On Monday morning of the following week, I packed up my book bag and started walking. During the last week that I'd been dropped off, we never saw the woman or the car, so I really wasn't worried at all anymore. However, this time, when I got to that same spot in the woods, she was there again, sitting in her car, watching me. I had a mini heart attack. This was too much to be a coincidence. Showing up twice on the trail that was basically our driveway, sitting in the same spot, and only showing up when I was walking alone. I made the decision to cut through the woods instead of walking past her again. I took a few steps off the trail, but immediately, the woman noticed. She turned her car on and drove up closer to me. I pretended to ignore her, walking faster into the woods. I heard her car door open and her footsteps crunching on the leaves behind me. But then she called out my name, like my full name, in this eerily calm and loving voice. I turned my head and looked at her. She had this dead stare and blank, expressionless face. Her eyes were tired and heavy, and she had this sickly look. I sprinted away, and after losing sight of her, I circled back through the woods to my house, where I called my parents. They called the police and came home right away. What I didn't expect was my parents to know exactly who the woman was. It was my dad's ex-wife from almost 2 decades ago. Apparently, she'd had mental health issues for a while and would have these horrifying episodes where she'd get obsessed with something and do disturbing things. The day I told them I saw her, my parents reported it to the police, knowing it had to be her. Police failed to do anything about it, though, only checking up on her and saying she seemed normal. For that whole week, though, she had been stalking our house, knowing that every time my parents left for work early, it meant I would be walking alone to school. My parents never told me what happened to her after this, or what she was trying to do to me, or why she was doing any of it. Hopefully, nothing like that happens again. This was in 2019. I worked at a grocery store, usually closing shifts, and I lived alone in a small 1-bedroom apartment. We had a lot of regulars at our store, customers that would come in all the time, and usually around the same time as well. One of these customers was a guy that came in right before closing, a couple times a week. Nobody knew his name, but everybody knew of him. because nobody liked customers that came in 10 minutes before the store closed. Usually being the only cashier, I'd be the one interacting with him. He was always a bit strange. He didn't talk much and always had a tired look on his face. This night, he came in as he always did, right before closing, grabbing a couple things and coming up to the register. I scanned everything, he paid, and he left. We didn't exchange any words aside from a simple greeting. 10 minutes later, I closed down the register and spent a few minutes cleaning up, clocking out and leaving at 10:15. As I walked out to my car, I noticed the man was still in the parking lot. He was standing awkwardly outside of his car with his hands at his side, just looking at the store. I got in my car and went home. I didn't have work the following day, so I stayed up a bit later than usual. I didn't get into bed until probably 1 a.m. Only moments after getting under the covers, though, a bright light glared into my bedroom through one of the windows. I thought it was a neighbor pulling in, so I didn't really care about it. After a second, the light shut off, which unconsciously confirmed to me that it was just headlights. I fell asleep only a couple minutes later. I woke up in the night to what I thought was my phone ringing. The way I woke up, half asleep and in the middle of a dream, it was hard to tell what was real and what wasn't. I rubbed my eyes and tapped my phone on the nightstand. It was blank. No messages or phone calls came in. I wasn't sure what to think. I was going to just ignore it and go back to sleep, as I wasn't even fully awake yet to begin with. But the slightest thing caught my eye as I rolled back over. The bedroom door was barely cracked open, not even enough to let any light in or anything. It was just uneven with the door frame, not latched shut. I always closed the door to my room, so seeing it not fully shut immediately woke me up. I got out of bed and walked over, pushing it closed to see if maybe it was stuck for some reason. It smoothly latched into the door frame, just like it always did, so there was no way I'd mistakenly left it open. I felt my body get shaky. My heart was pounding, but even with everything pointing otherwise, I still tried to convince myself that this was somehow nothing. I tried to think of any possible way that this was something to not worry about, but my mind thought back to the light I saw before falling asleep. I walked over to the window and peeked through the blinds. There was a car parked in my driveway. I could only see the back half of it, but I instantly felt a rush of panic. Who was at my house, and was someone inside with me? I hurried over to the door again and flicked on the lights. I stood there by the door, panicking and thinking, realizing I should call 911 just to be safe. I looked at the nightstand that my phone was on, and just before I started to walk over there, I saw an eye looking back at me from a crack in the closet. My body shook, and I let out a gasp, then spun around and sprinted out of my house. By the time I found a neighbor that would answer their door and call the police for me, at least 15 minutes had gone by already. The car in my driveway was still there when officers showed up, but the man was gone. It didn't take long for them to use the car to track him down, though, and I felt nauseous when it turned out to be the man from the grocery store. His reasonings for everything didn't make any sense, but it was clear he'd had his eye on me for a while now, and he was not mentally well. I think the only reason I'd woken up that night was because the man's phone rang while he was hiding, and he silenced it just as I woke up. If not for that, I don't know what would have happened to me, or if I'd even be here right now. When I was 22, I started seeing a guy who I met on a dating app for a while. His name was Hunter. We went on like 4 dates in the span of a little over a month. At first, things seemed all right. Our first date was a quick coffee date, less than an hour, more of a screening process to make sure he seemed normal. Our second date was at a nearby bar for some drinks. We both got a nice buzz, and it was a nice time. Our third date was dinner, and this was when I started to question things. Question if I really clicked with his personality, or if I felt like there was something slightly off about him. The date ended with a kiss still, the first and only time we ever kissed. So I convinced myself that because I let him kiss me, things went all right. It wasn't until a couple weeks later that we went on our fourth and final date. We went out for drinks once again. However, this time, I went into it with a less excited mindset, and I was paying more attention to little quirks in his behavior that I realized were kind of unusual. It's hard to explain exactly what I mean, but some of his mannerisms just gave off antisocial and borderline creepy vibes. He started to drink way too much on this date as well, and he started getting really touchy-feely at the bar, trying to kiss multiple times. I'm not a fan of PDA, especially not when sitting at a bar with people next to me. I politely turned down his advances, and within a few minutes, I mentioned I was tired, heavily implying we should leave. He asked for the check, paid it, and then we grabbed our coats and left. As we were walking to our cars, he stopped me and very bluntly asked me if we could go home together. I said not tonight. I'm tired and have work tomorrow, which was a lie. He shockingly kept trying, saying he'd drive me to work tomorrow and such. I found it to be absurd whether he was drunk or not. I also wasn't a fan of him drunk driving home. I made the decision at that point that I wouldn't see him again. I went to my car in the parking lot across the street and started driving home slowly, just because I had a couple drinks in my system. I wasn't drunk, but I was still very cautious. I was also overly alert of my surroundings, looking around for cops, which perhaps is why I picked up on the fact that the same car was still behind me after I made at least 3 turns. At a certain stoplight, I realized it looked like Hunter's car. I texted him, "Are you following me?" He texted back pretty quickly, saying, "Yes, I just want to make sure you get home okay." I called him, but he wouldn't pick up. This was so weird, and quite frankly, creepy. I pulled over and texted him to stop following me. "I'm fine." He stopped in the middle of the street for a second, I presumed to read my text, and then he drove off past me. He didn't text back, not until I got home and was in bed. He said as follows, "I hope I didn't weird you out tonight. Sorry I got so drunk. Next time we should do something a little more low-key, like dinner at my place or something." I didn't answer. So the next morning, he followed up with, "Oh no, is the vibe dead?" I still decided to wait a bit to respond. Not even 2 hours later, he sends me a question mark. So I decided to reply now, before it got worse. I said, "Hey, I had a great time getting to know you, but I just think our personalities don't click that much. I also really just want to focus on myself right now. I hope you understand." After this was when the angry text started coming in, the worst of which being, "No, I don't understand. You strung me along for 4 dates to tell me that? How about you pay me back half of everything I bought for you then?" There were a few other angry texts that involved personal information, so I'm not going to include them, but they were enough to prompt me to block him. I thought this would be the end of it. But then I started receiving no caller ID phone calls nonstop. I ignored all of them until he finally seemed to get the message and stopped. The next day, when my parents weren't home, I got home from work to find a bouquet of flowers on the stoop, along with a card. The card was an apology from Hunter, asking for a second chance. He somehow knew where I lived. That disturbed me. In his mind, he somehow must have thought that this would come off as charming or sweet, when in reality, it was extremely alarming. I sent a long and final text to him to please not contact me anymore and never come to my house again, or I'd file for a restraining order. I kept his number blocked so I wouldn't see his response. I thought things would be over now, but I couldn't be more wrong. It was not long after this that I was home alone for the night. My parents' house is big, and I had a loft bedroom, which meant my bedroom was the highest point in the house. I awoke in the middle of the night to something. I wasn't sure what it was at first, but I felt as though I was hearing noises from downstairs. I tried my best to listen closely, and then I heard what was very obviously a door opening from outside my bedroom, one of the upstairs doors. Nobody was supposed to be home that night. Even in my haze from freshly waking up, I still immediately thought intruder. I crawled out of my bed onto the floor and shimmied under the bed. Before calling 911, I texted everyone in my family asking who was home. I heard some distant noises from somewhere in the home, one of the other bedrooms. And then my bedroom door opened, and footsteps came up the carpeted stairs. After they reached the top step, there was silence. The whole room was carpeted, so I couldn't hear any potential footsteps. And then I heard the drawers next to my bed begin opening. I held my mouth with my hands to mask my breathing. I could feel my heart racing. I heard a man's voice say, "God fucking damn it," under his breath. In that moment, I thought, wait, that might have sounded like Hunter's voice. I still didn't move, and I prayed my phone did not get any notifications now. I heard more rummaging sounds. He was going through my entire dresser. Then I heard and felt the bed move as he sat down. I was staring at the outline of 2 shoes through the bed skirt. Even in the dark, it was visible. I don't know what he was doing on the bed, but he sat there for over 2 or 3 minutes before getting up, and I heard him say under his breath, "Fucking bitch." I heard all the drawers close, and then I heard footsteps walk back down the stairs, the door shutting, and then sounds of footsteps walking down the stairs to the living room. I called 911 now, and I still whispered into the phone just to be safe. I stayed on the line and stayed under the bed for 10 to 15 minutes until one of the police officers showed up, and I went down to meet them at the front door, and even that was tense. After letting him in, I told him everything he didn't already know from the phone call he responded to. As such, he did a sweep of the house, and during that, another officer arrived, this one female, who also assisted in the search. It turned out every window was unlocked, and one of the windows, the dining room one, is big enough for someone to crawl through, though I don't think anyone ever pictured someone squeezing through the bush in front of the window and then crawling through it. I gave a verbal statement of everything. I was given a report number, and they left. When my parents returned home the next day, they already knew everything from my texts and phone call with them. We went to the police station with my report number and gave as much information as possible, such as text screenshots, including him admitting he was following me home. They said they'd investigate, though without solid proof it was him inside the house, it was tricky. I think the case lost steam when I really didn't have any proof of anything. I did, however, successfully get a restraining order against him, and I was advised to never accuse him of having broken in, nor ever contact him again. He thankfully didn't. But from that point till the moment I moved out of my parents' house, I was always uncomfortable he would be creeping around outside. Even today, I sometimes fear he might find out where I currently live. I was in the 6th grade when this happened. This all started on the week of Halloween, when I would stay after school to help decorate a haunted house for my school's Halloween carnival. I often got to stay and fool around with some of my friends while getting awarded with pizza for helping decorate. Along with my friends, there was also this other kid who would stay late. I'll call him Chris. We had gotten along for the entirety of the time that we would stay after school, and he never once gave me any reason to feel uneasy around him. He was genuinely a funny and cool kid. But anyway, fast forward 2 weeks. I was suddenly approached by a group of girls in my grade who were all excited and had wide grins on their faces. I asked them what was going on, only for them to tell me that I had a secret admirer and that he would be texting me tonight. Now I'd be lying to you if I told you that I wasn't excited, or at the very least curious about this. I wanted to know who. Later that night, when I was about to go to sleep, I got a notification from Messenger. It was the only app I had at the time that I always used to communicate with my parents whenever I was home alone. The message was from Chris. I had completely forgotten that I added him on Facebook on Halloween. I opened the message, and it read, "Maya, I need to talk to you." I was concerned and quickly replied, "Yeah, what's going on? Everything okay?" To this day, I wish I hadn't replied. The typing bubbles appeared and stayed there for a good 2 minutes, which meant that he was still typing. It felt like forever until his message finally came through. I didn't expect what came next. In a long paragraph, he confessed his love for me and how I've been driving him crazy since Halloween. He also proceeded to explain how he tried to impress me during recess and phys ed with his soccer skills, but that I never seemed to notice him. He said that he was growing tired of being ignored, and it ended with, "I want you to notice me." So I guess what I'm trying to say is, will you be my girlfriend? I cringed at every word. I stared at the message for a long time. What the hell? I barely even know this kid, and I drifted apart from him a long time ago. I was trying to come up with a way to let him down easily, as I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I told him I didn't like him like that, and that I wanted to just be friends. I could tell right away that he didn't like this answer. He kept asking me why, and I had to come up with a reason each time until he eventually stopped answering. The next morning was a nightmare for me. Some of his friends kept coming up to me and telling me that Chris wanted to kiss me, which he told the entire grade he wanted to do, and that he would do it even if it meant cornering me. Taking this as a threat, I decided to tell my teacher. She told me to stay inside during recess and lunch, and that if he ever got even close to me, to run right back to the classroom. This wasn't enough for me. I reported him to the principal, who told me he would do something right away, and this gave me some relief. I feel I should mention that I lived right across the street from my school, and everyone knew this, including Chris, which leads me to what happened next. Later on in the week, I was walking home from school. I hadn't even been inside my house for more than 2 minutes before I heard someone knocking on my front door. I peeked out the window just in time to see someone ducking behind a parked car across the street. It had to be Chris. He must have been following me. My mom opened the door to find a piece of paper on the floor, and not surprisingly, it was addressed to me. I read the note out loud, and it said there was a surprise waiting for me under the Cadillac in my driveway, which at the time belonged to my brother. My mom went to check, only to find nothing. But it was after this day, my brother's Cadillac stopped working. I still have no idea what Chris did to the car, but my brother was forced to sell it. Unfortunately, my nightmare doesn't end there. I was constantly harassed by Chris's friends telling me to give him a chance and that he would treat me right. There was even a moment when I caught Chris taking a picture of me walking home, and the only reason I saw him was because I barely heard the sound of an iPhone camera behind me. Who knows how many photos of me he had on his phone? And every morning, I woke up to a message from him with something along the lines of, "I can't wait to see you at school," or "I bet you'll look beautiful today." The harassment and stalking were only getting worse, and it was making me fear for my safety, especially now that he knew where I lived. Finally, I got a call into the counselor's office, and I felt relieved, expecting her to tell me that Chris was going to get in trouble or that the cops would get involved. Anything. Instead, what I heard was worse. The counselor proceeded to tell me that boys will be boys, that they do crazy things when they're in love, and that I shouldn't be mad about this. She told me I should feel flattered as this kind of stuff was bound to happen, and that the only thing I could do was to accept it and learn from it. At the time, I didn't see the problem with her words, as I genuinely believed her. But looking back on it now, this was an insane and disturbing thing to say to a 6th grader who was being sexually harassed and who was fearing for her safety almost every day. That afternoon, I came home from school, telling my mom everything the counselor told me, and she was rightfully furious. I was called to the principal's office again that same week, this time with my mom present. I remember very clearly my mom telling the counselor and principal, "What are you waiting for? For something bad to happen to her before you do something?" She continued to ask why it was taking so long for something to be done. They both stayed silent. My mom ended it by threatening the counselor and telling her to never speak to me again unless she was present. But unfortunately, I don't think the school ever did punish Chris, which to this day enrages me. He basically got away with everything. It doesn't even end there. One night during the weekend when my parents had gone shopping, I was about to go to bed after watching a YouTube video on my iPad when I heard something at my window. Now, I'm on the 2nd floor, so this was especially strange. The only thing that hits my window are birds accidentally flying into it. I sat up listening. Then it happened again. It sounded as if someone had thrown something at the glass. Then it happened again and again. There were consistent thuds, and it was starting to freak me out. I finally got the courage to get up from my bed and see what it was. My heart dropped into my stomach when I opened the curtain and looked down to see Chris holding a handful of rocks looking up at my window. He somehow had managed to figure out which window was mine. He was about to throw another when he noticed me. I could ever so slightly see that he was saying something, but I didn't stop to see what. I remember going to see if every window and door was locked, and thankfully, everything was. When I returned to my room, I received 4 messages from Chris. "Why did you leave? I just want to talk. I'm sorry. All I wanted was a kiss. Please forgive me. You are not who I thought you were. Bye." I blocked him after that. Thankfully, I never had another incident, even though I had to see him throughout the entirety of my school years, from 6th grade to senior year. The last thing I heard about him was that he was arrested. God only knows for what. The saddest and scariest part of my story, though, is the fact that a counselor was comfortable with telling me that this kind of behavior was a compliment and a learning experience for me as a girl. I just hope that woman no longer works with children and that I never have to see Chris again.